We now have a good idea of what we want to program and how, so let's start implementing our game in Scratch.
We'll start a new project and we'll first take care of the game interface. In our game, we have 3 objects: the zombie, the flower and the broom, which makes zombies go away. So we'll replace the cat with a broom, which we'll draw ourselves. Let's name it Broom. We'll also create a new sprite for the flower, which we'll call Flower. And we'll draw 2 costumes for it. The 2 costumes differ in the positioning of the stem and the face of the flower. So why have these 2 costumes? As we've discussed in previous units, switching between costumes gives us an animation effect. So in this case, it could look like the flowers are dancing. Good. Now let's add a new sprite for the zombie, which we'll draw ourselves. It could look like this. Let's name both the sprite and its costume Zombie. And let's set its rotation style to left-right. If we need to, we can also adjust its size. Great! Now that we've got all our sprites and their costumes, it's time to take care of the stage. We'll draw a new backdrop that is similar to our sketch. On the far left, there is a house, and the rest of the screen depicts a garden. We'll name it Garden. We'll also create a different backdrop to be displayed when the game is over, like this. Let's name it Game Over.
Our game interface is now ready. Now let's start implementing the behavior of our objects following our design. Let's start with the broom. According to our pseudocode, the broom will keep going to the mouse position.
To implement this, we'll need to create a new block for initialize. Then we'll specify that when the green flag is clicked, the broom will be initialized. Next, we'll add a forever block, putting inside it a block for going to the mouse position. What does the broom initialization involve? Placing it in the center and saying the instructions.
The broom's program is now ready. Let's move to the implementation for the zombie. Based on what we discussed when designing the code for the zombie, we'll need to define 3 variables. One for the time between the appearance of zombies, one for the score, and finally another one for the speed of their movement.
Let's first define the variable for the time between the appearance of zombies. We'll name it Time Between Zombies. We want to make this variable visible on the screen, and the user should be able to configure it. To achieve this, we could use the Ask and Wait block, but we'll go for a different approach. If we right-click on the variable on the screen, we'll see different options. We'll choose Slider, which allows us to change the value of the variable at runtime, simply by moving the bar. We'll once again right-click on it to set the range of time between zombies to be between 1 and 5. What this means is that the player can change the time between zombies to a value between 1 and 5 seconds while playing the game, like this. The second variable that we'll need to specify is the one for the speed. Finally, we'll specify the score variable.
Now that we've defined the variables that are needed, let's implement the zombie behavior following our pseudocode.
When the green flag is clicked, the zombie will be initialized. Let's create a new block called Initialize, the body of which will be defined in a bit. We'll then add a forever block, inside which we'll specify that a clone is created and that we wait for a short time, which in our case is time between zombies.
Now let's specify our initialize procedure.
So we'll set the time between zombies to 5 and we'll show this variable. We'll also initialize the score to 0 and display it. And we'll set the initial speed to be 5 and we'll hide this variable. We'll also wait a few seconds to give some time to the player to read the instructions. In previous units, we've mentioned that when working with clones, it's useful to introduce a hide block at the beginning of the program, so that the actual sprite is not visible on the screen. Let's do this.
As discussed previously, we want the zombie speed to change automatically every few seconds. This can be defined in a separate script that runs concurrently with the existing script. In the next video, we'll focus on the behavior of the zombie clones.